We are not alone. You are watching Contact TV with your hosts, Leslie Mitchell-Clark
and Wes Roberts,
exploring ufology, metaphysics, and beyond with the world's foremost experts. And a very good evening to everyone out there. We're so happy that you could join us for our debut fall episode of Contact TV, kicking off our season. And we're incredibly thrilled and also honored to be welcoming back to the program Captain Randy Cramer, aka Captain K. And Randy is a nearly lifelong experiencer contactee, as well as a U.S. military participant in the off-world parallel space programs that have been taking place since the 1950s on Mars, the Moon, and elsewhere. And Captain Randy Cramer is an officer who has been given authority to address the public on behalf of the Command Staff of the United States Marine Corps Special Section, which was created by President Eisenhower in 1953 as a covert military intelligence branch with specific authority over extraterrestrial, multidimensional, non-human, and off-world beings, consortiums, and collectives, either sanctioned or unsanctioned, with actionable reach of any and all global territory. And certainly Randy Cramer is the product of the Soldier Augmentation Project, known as Moonshadow, which was a training program for children which he began at the age of 4. He later spent a 20-year tour of duty off-world, over 17 of which was spent serving in the Mars Defense Force. He finished his service aboard the EDF SS Nautilus as a pilot under Project Radiant Guardian. And in August of 2013, not so long ago, Captain Cramer's superior officers requested that he consider going public with their blessing, and he began to share his personal experience with the world as of April 2014. Thank you for joining us, Randy. We're so happy that you could be here with us again on Contact TV. And as we get started in exploring this tremendous subject, when do you believe that the parallel space program that we were discussing truly began? Was it sparked by the post-war Roswell-era technology exchange with the military-industrial complex under, I suppose, at that time, Truman's regime? Or is it more like it was described in Corso's book, The Day After Roswell? When did this parallel space program really kick off?
Well, I have this strange feeling of deja vu that I've done this all before. Yeah, but I am very happy to be here. And I was hearing you perfectly up until the second half of that question, and then it was like your words were going through an electronic blender, and I did not catch any of the second half of that question. So I'm sorry, can you ask me that again, please?
Certainly, Randy. I'm so sorry. I was just asking, when do you believe that the parallel space program truly began? Was it sparked or instigated by the post-war Roswell-era technology exchange, possibly with EBEs? The exchange that took place between the EBEs and perhaps the early rumblings of the military-industrial complex as described in Corso's book, The Day After Roswell?
Right. So that's all a good question. And I would say that you're kind of splitting hairs on dates. So like the very, very first date that the very first military intelligence organization had access to information that there was an extraterrestrial question and or technology and started to reverse engineer and or accept that they needed to have a space program and or got wind that the Nazis were doing something similar and decided to try and chameleon another program, and or at what point extraterrestrials got involved with that, or at what point, they gave us, or, we sort of fell off the back of the truck, space technology that we could reverse engineer. All of those are sort of somewhere between, 1937 and 1947, depending on exactly what event and who and what was occurring. That all started to happen sort of in that decade. So World War II, and there's a lot of chaos of sort of what was going on in World War II, what the Nazis were doing, what we were doing, a conflict, a integration of so many different technologies, military intelligence institutions that were being formed and created that would, sort of affect our lives forever after that. And so that decade, it all sort of started to germinate, and by 1947, you certainly had Truman officially having to manage individual projects, but it started getting out of control, I would say, almost immediately. And it probably wasn't until Eisenhower came along and decided that there's something had to be done to try and regulate, bring some control into it, and create an organization that would hopefully have the ability to create some balance and some reference to law and order and all of that, which we've done our best to do the entire time we've been a part of this. But yeah, I would say it was just a thing that germinated and then developed, and by 1947 it had grown into an official program. But what date exactly in there somewhere? Between 1938 and 1947 probably.
Wow, that much earlier than anyone could probably imagine. While you were working as part of the Mars Defense Force, did you ever see, when you were out and about on patrol and going about your activities, or even just exploring, did you ever see so-called alien ruins on the Martian surface that might point to an earlier ancient humanoid presence, something in the neighborhood of what Zecharia Sitchin has described with regard to Mars being used as a possible way station by the Anunnaki? Did you see any ruins of any sort that were intriguing?
A few different types of ruins, but I've had people ask me this before, like whether or not I've seen like pyramid structures. I don't think that anything that I saw I would qualify as a pyramidal structure, but there are certainly things that I saw that were remnants of civilized construction, village areas. Now, but probably one of the more bizarre things that I ever saw was what can only be described as the skeleton of a skyscraper, half buried in the ground and half sticking up out of the ground. So, the oxidation on it and so forth was obviously incredibly old and had been exposed to incredible weatherization. But, there's only so many things you can say that have that sort of rectangular up and down, lattice structure. Even if you've got just a few pieces like Tinker Toys sticking out of the ground, you really can only draw so many conclusions on what that is, and it's just the leftover frame of a skyscraper. So there's certainly evidence of quite advanced civilization there, but I personally, never got to see a pyramid, but I've certainly seen the satellite pictures and so forth and know that they're there.
Yeah, indeed. Something that you and I have talked about briefly before, as you know, I work with a number of experiencers as a hypnotherapist, and a surprisingly large percentage of these individuals have had experiences that are, in fact, quite similar to your experience. And some of these individuals came to me sometimes years before you actually came out and began discussing your experiences openly. So that to me gives their recountings a lot of veracity, because they're sort of unpolluted, right, by any other stimuli. One of these gentlemen who was told me about a experience when he was a cadet in a program very similar or related to yours, and he was in this experience, along with his fellow cadets, taught to bilocate by an alien hybrid being who was working very closely with the entire cadet program, if you will. And this teaching involved a kind of a special chair. And initially the cadets were taught to sort of float on the ceiling. That was their initial experience. They had to sit in the chair to do this, and they were guided by the ET being. And of course, over the years, their skill levels were refined. But this chair reminded me very much of what you have discussed in previous interviews with regard to the kind of virtual reality chairs or units that you and your colleagues used for recreation while you were stationed on Mars itself, and also probably on other planets and situations. Does any of this resonate with you? The cadet training, the bilocation training, the help of some type of special chair. Just wondering if this resonates with you at all.
Well, that sounds like a very specific program to try and develop a very specific psionic skill with a very specific test group. So that sounds like a very specific set of tools. The simulators that we use both on Mars and on board the ship, on board the Nautilus, were a standing unit where you stand in it. You essentially sort of lean against a pad that's squishy and kind of sticky, so it kind of holds you up to it. And you wear this goofy-looking headgear and these giant, goofy-looking oven mitts that have sensors in them for kinesthetic memory. And so it's not an attractive look. I mean, you really look goofy. You look like a giant Q-tip. It's pretty with big old oven fish mitts on your hand. It's really goofy looking, but it enables you to get a fully virtual experience while having a training or extracurricular or recreational experience, which going somewhere is a security risk. Let's just and costly. If you have a simulator that serves purpose, then why do anything else? And so I can say that the simulation of taking a walk in the woods or a walk on the beach, as real as it seems, was enough to maintain our sanity when otherwise we lived in a tin can on a desert planet and under a mountain, and that was it. I mean, that's enough to drive a person mad after enough years. But just this simulation of being able to be somewhere for a certain amount of time, it was enough to like go, oh no, I'm better. I just having a walk in the woods. I'm cool. Even though it's a completely virtual experience, it's real enough that you certainly feel okay by that. And the training experience, completely valid. Spent a lot of time using them for training because it's a way to both train without using the real equipment in real time, and where you can damage real equipment, but it operates at a higher clock speed, as it were, so you're actually operating at about a 400% rate, so you actually experience about 4 hours internal for every 1 hour of external time ticking by. So you can have a 4-hour training period in the morning that's actually like 12 hours. It's like a full day, and then lunch, and then you do another 12 hours. So really in one day, you could do 24 hours of training.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Was this sort of training that I mentioned with the separation of the etheric body or the spirit body, if you want to look at it that way, is this something that you experienced at any point during your training?
That sounds like something I remember from the Psionic training handbook. I mean, it sounds like a basic astral projection kind of, bilocation, teaching people to be out of their body in order to maneuver around and so forth. Seems like they were teaching a very specific psionic skill to a very specific group. That's not how taught necessarily. We weren't taught with a special chair or anything like that, and it wasn't a skill that we were necessarily taught to focus on either because it has dangers. Remote viewing is actually a lot safer than bilocating. So I'm not sure. And that's the main reason why we don't really do it anymore. There are a few people who are really proficient at it, and we find that there are some people who are highly proficient at certain skills, and if someone shows a real high proficiency for that skill, it might be worth training them. There might be a value in having someone who's really, really good at that, but it's not really a skill you want to train everybody at because it's dangerous.
Yeah, indeed.
You're leaving your body. You're trusting beings or people that caretake for your body, and something could happen, or something else could come into your body, or you can have all kinds of sort of problems with that. And you don't have to go anywhere to remote view very, very clearly. It's just a matter of, again, developing that skill. I think it's easier for people to develop than to astral project.
Yes, I completely agree, and certainly this agenda had rather dark side elements to it, and we can talk about that offline sometime. But it was. So, could you tell our audience just?
Well, part of the purpose may have been to get people that somebody could come in.
Yeah, yeah. It was both. It was both coming in and going out, and they started with these teenage people who were, I think, as you say, rather adept naturally, and because it wasn't the whole contingency. It was a small, a small group of people who were involved in this. But would you mind, Randy, telling our audience a little bit about what you mean by psionics and the recent training that you've been doing, and how this is a really breathtaking kind of technique, if you wish to call it that.
Oh well, psionics are it's your mind powers. So and psionic energy is all projected mental energy, and all thought produces psionic energy, psionic output. So, and there are physical laws of physics that govern psionics, the laws of psionics. I got to do a couple of sort of workshop introductory kind of lectures last year on it, and didn't really have enough days to do the full curriculum like I really wanted to do, and I know everyone's been pestering me about it, and I have every intention to finish up that curriculum for that class and set up something else and do another class probably sometime in 2017, where everybody was wondering. But suffice it to say, different specific areas of the covert military space program over the years have had choices on what to focus on. And some people, for instance, may have decided to spend their time focusing on better jump gates. Somebody may have decided to spend their time focusing on the fastest spaceships. Someone may have been wanting to focus their time on the just absolute best stealth cloaking visibility technology. Where we decided as a command that psionics was actually probably the most important thing for us to develop long term, both as individuals and as a unit, as a command unit, that would help us function better and essentially in a more intergalactically evolved kind of state. So we are what I would call, we are definitely a psionic command. We operate psionically. We all have implants that connect us to a psionic computer. So we operate in what I would call a pseudo or quasi hive mind. So it means that we have access to each other's information and knowledge and experience at different times. It's not like a jumble of, like thoughts or things in your head, like you're like, get out of my mind. No, it's absolutely nothing like that. It's nothing like that at all. It's really just like having, psionically, emotionally, they're just right next to you at all times. And the ability to sort of communicate via those channels is very, very fluid and very, very short and very, very quick. And I'm not sure how else to describe it other than just sort of the way that it experiences, the way that it feels. But we've been getting better and better and better at it. I've certainly been getting better and better over the last few years that I've been having to practice it and be at it every day and communicate that way every day and get information that way every day and send information that way every day. And it's been an interesting development process for me personally. But the thing I think is most important about what we understand about psionics is that we want to promote the very idea of it because human beings are classified intergalactically as a psionically emergent species. And what that means is that we are on the verge of psionic emergence when we become sort of fully psionically aware of ourselves and have just what we would call the most basic fundamental access to our psionic senses and abilities, which is low-grade, constant telepathy, sort of an extrasensory awareness of people, places, emotions, things, and so forth. So, as I like to point out, because I can sort of blah, blah, blah about this, simplify this. If you want to imagine what it would be like to live in a world where every single person had just enough psionic awareness so that no one could ever lie to another human being ever again. If you don't think that that would change the world that we live in, I would suggest you think about that a little bit harder. So psionic emergence is something we want. We want that. We want to get to psionic emergence. We want the culture to get past, being just barely psionically emergent into becoming a psionic culture. So once we get to psionic culture, then we get to experience the benefits of being psionic beings, which is having a more honest civilization, because people can't lie to each other, having a more sincere system, because if you say something, you'll actually be able to feel that you hurt that person's feelings. Oh, I feel that I hurt that person's feelings. That was kind of dickish of me. Oh, I'm sorry, I hurt your feelings. You don't have to wait for them to tell you, you really hurt my feelings there, because you'll feel that you feel your feelings. So what some of us already experience right now, the whole world will get to experience, and that changes the world. So we believe that just promoting the notion of psionic development and psionic emergence and psionic well-being and the process of that is something that just will get us there that much sooner. So we're very happy to be able to start providing, some of that information and leaking that out to people in the public and so forth. So I've taught a group of students and given the lecture on the laws of psionics to a couple different groups of people. So we're getting to a place where I'm getting better at teaching information that I've never had to teach before, right? That's all stuff that I had to take, in class years and years and years and years ago, and stuff that I do on a daily basis as far as my own personal development. But as far as like teaching this class, like these last two bits I did last year, it's the first time I taught the class, and my brigadier general said, I was like, well, what should I teach on? What should I talk on? He was like, well, what do you think is probably the most important thing? I was like, well, psionics, right? He was like, probably. So I was like, okay, so what should I do about that? And he was like, well, talk about the laws of psionics, talk about psionic self-defense, talk about the protocols. So that's what I did. And turns out that I'm pretty familiar with the material. So I felt pretty good about that, having done it the first one of chats. Enough that I feel like when we actually get a curriculum that's the right number of days, when I really sorted out it takes this many hours to teach this part and this part, because we were really just like a day and a half short, and trying to figure out how to sort of pack that all in so we can get a full curriculum class. And then, as everyone keeps asking me, we should have a DVD that we can, disseminate to people, and that then everybody can watch, and without necessarily having to come and take the class personally. And we would very much like to just have that out there for people to bring into their awareness. That, most importantly, psionics are not airy-fairy. You can have your airy-fairy, whatever you want with your psionic mental, metaphysical relationship, but it's science, it's physics, it operates under a system of physical laws, and so when your left brain understands that it's rational, and your right brain understands that it's experiential, both sides of your brain connect, and actually that magnifies psionic output when you have whole brain activity as opposed to when you're just doing right or left. And we actually go in the class, go into a whole bit about brainwave mastery and balancing the hemispheres and so forth, and a measuring device called the mind mirror that shows you sort of in real time your left and right hemispheres and amplitudes and so forth, so that you can actually see the patterns that your brainwaves make, and talk about what patterns you want to make, what patterns you don't want to make, and what patterns look like and feel like experientially, so forth. Talk about dominant harmonic frequencies, blah, 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 blah. Anyway, so yes, we're still working on that, and there will eventually be another class on DVD production, and yeah, it turns out it's pretty fun to teach that class on psionics.
Oh, that's wonderful, Randy. Have you found that with the students who are taking up this study, and you're talking about accessibility to both hemispheres of the brain and brainwaves firing, do you find that people who are perhaps musical or artistic have maybe a greater affinity for this type of work? Because what we now know from the real-time mapping of the brain is that musicians and other creative artists, but particularly people dealing with music, have massive brain firing going on in both hemispheres, like all over the place.
Well, it turns out that most people have an activity that they do in which their brain does that, in which it goes into what we call an awakened or creative mind state, when both hemispheres come together and the brain waves kind of harmonize and your brain waves kind of goes into the, what I sort of call the, oh, when sort of everything gets perfect and the lights shine down from heaven and so forth. And because mentally, that's kind of what it feels like. Like when you're doing it mentally, you kind of feel like in this almost ecstatic, state of perfection, because literally your brain waves and your brain frequencies and everything is in this real balanced, harmonic shape. And so it really does feel pretty harmonious and perfect. And it's for a lot of people, it's figuring out what that activity is that you do, that your brain generates that activity, and understanding that that's part of your waking or dynamic meditative exercise, and that teaching people then how to take those brainwave states into meditative exercise, deep theta states, etc. There can certainly be a ease of transition for people who are really already familiar with getting both hemispheres sort of balanced and going with an activity that they do on a regular basis. That's practice. And as I teach in the class, the more you practice telling your brainwaves, no, get balanced and harmonized, like they will. They really just will. And it's frustrating at first because they don't want to do it. They go, no, we don't want to. But really, the more you do it, the more they just kind of go, okay, it's fine. It's less and less begrudgingly every time until they're like, okay, let's do it. And it really does work like that. And I really have to try and convince people that even I have body and mental resistances. I don't want to do this right now. It's a struggle that every person goes through with their mind and their body, trying to tell it to do what you want it to do. And everybody's body does that. My body does that. It's constantly wanting to do other things that are not good for me, just like yours and everyone else's does when you sit down to meditate. And there are things your brain and body wants to distract you with, just like mine does. It's an individual process. So the main thing I try and do is teach the fundamentals of the laws, brainwave mastery, the tools, how people customize those tools, how people sort of develop their own operating system for telling their, training their psionic abilities and telling their brain and their body what to do. I think it went really, really well. We just were short for time because I thought, 2 and 3.5 days would be enough, and it wasn't.
Yeah, well, it's incredibly exciting, and could psionics be used also for healing, remote healing?
Psionics are used for everything. Just everything. I mean, really, the answer to that is that every single species that develops its psionic abilities uses its psionic abilities to enhance every single action, thought, activity that it performs. So there really is nothing that you can't add a psionic tool to make it a better tool. Every action that you do, every thought that you do, every meditative, emotional, physical action that you perform, there is some way that you can add psionics to that and develop it. And there is a scale of turning that thing into a psionic tool that's at this level or at this level that can take years, weeks, months, lifetimes, depending on the scale of development, to sort of, get better at something. So there's this limitless scale of development once you start enhancing something with a psionic ability or a psionic tool. So there is no like, oh, I've enhanced that with a psionic tool, I'm good. No, you started enhancing that with a psionic tool, and now you can keep enhancing that with a psionic tool for another 1,000 lifetimes and keep getting better and better and better at it until you can, start fires with your mind and heal people with a thought. I mean, those are psionic abilities that come from starting at a very, very, very primitive level of trying to do something and having to struggle with it and spending a really, really, really long time practicing it, and then getting to a place where it feels much more like the second nature of flexing, like blinking an eye, to going, oh, you're healed, or I'm thirsty, let me bring that glass of water over to me, or another level of, well, why don't I just fill my water glass with water in it, or how about I just get the whole glass and the whole water right out of thin air and then put it back when I'm done. I mean, those are all different levels of understanding how your psionic ability can interact with your reality and simply maneuver energy, matter, quantum structure, and make it do more what you want it to do. And so we start at the very, very fundamental levels of nudging things, really just like, very subtle nudges is really what you're working on before you eventually can, lift a rock, sort of in the air or something like that. There's just a whole chasm of space between the steps and stages that you get through to that. But there's so many stages of development. So as you progress, way before you get to lift the rock, you're going to learn and develop so many other cool things that you can do that you stop being interested necessarily that lifting the rock is a goal, but lifting the rock just becomes one landmark point of development. But there's so many other things that you will learn how to do as you develop your skills. Because psionics are something that you don't just focus on one thing and get good at that thing. The more you develop your mental skills, the more you develop your brainwave mastery, the more everything starts to develop. Your memory gets better, your IQ starts to go up, your pattern recognition goes up. All of these sort of mental, functional, abilities increase. So it really is the one way that any human being, and this is sort of like my carrot and the stick, right? This is the one way for any human being to give themselves superpowers that they want, which is to meditate every day and develop your psionic abilities until you develop them into a superhuman ability. So anyone who really thinks that there's no way to get your own superpowers, I'm telling you, psionics.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And it's so interesting, Randy, the way you put it, that we are kind of on a nascent crest of, joining the psionic civilizations or the beings that are already able to utilize their brains, if you will, to enhance and communicate and such. What do you think it is that has kept us as the human race in sort of the primordial sludge of selfishness and separateness? Is it just that we're masters of our own limitation, as Bashar would say? Are there genetic reasons for this, that some of our genome has not yet turned on or is in the process of turning on? Are we hybrid beings? Why do you think we are sort of having so much trouble with this leap, which seems from the outsider as if it was a seamless leap for some of the other cultures and beings that you and others have interacted with regularly?
Well, there's a lot of ways to go with that. And I'm going to use a metaphor that some people might really not be happy with, but I'm going to do it anyway.
Good.
If I walked into a zoo for the very first time, and as I went around from habitat to habitat, and I noticed that the animals were in social disarray, social conflict, constantly aggressing each other and themselves, fighting for resources and food within the habitats, defecating and urinating on themselves and creating unhealthy biological environments. The first thing I wouldn't do is blame the animals. The first thing I would do is want to hold the zookeepers accountable for why they allowed something they were supposed to be maintaining to a level to which the animals within the zoo could function properly, and why they have let the system run so badly amok that now, instead of coming into a zoo where I can observe these creatures in some sort of habitat which resembles their some peaceful resemblance of their natural environment, that you can go, hey, animal, I'm sorry you're necessarily in a cage and not in the wild, but at the same time you're not lunch this afternoon, or you don't have to chase down your food this afternoon, so, civilization ain't all bad, you've got indoor plumbing, and I can just say I've been to some places where animals look miserable, and I've been to some places where the animals are totally stoked to be there. So I'm not trying to pass a judgment, positive or negative, on zoos or habitats for animals. I'm simply using a metaphor. And so I think the main thing to say there is that we bear a certain ability, but a majority of that responsibility bears on caretakers. because there are so many things we are simply not capable of doing ourselves without a little bit of help to do it. And as much as some of us would like to think that that's not true, or we're completely capable of taking things care of on our own, I completely would disagree with that. And so I think that you have to look at a horrible mismanagement. This is the worst. And so I would like to hold people more accountable when the habitat has been cleaned up a little bit, and the critters are feeling less stressed out, like they got to compete for the food bowl and less throwing poop at each other, because their habitat's been cleaned up a little bit. Because what we know from basic human psychology and social psychology is that both animals and people behave in accordance with the comfort to their environment. And so, perfect example, New York City, the broken window rule or whatever that they figured out, which was how you sort of fix these sort of crumbling neighborhoods by fixing every broken window, paint everything up, that it psychologically changes the way people feel about the neighborhood, feel about the space, and it literally pushes negative elements to other areas. They simply do not want to act in their corrupt, nefarious activity in that cleaned up area, and they go away. And people who live in cleaned up neighborhoods are less stressed and drink less and self-medicate less, and people who live in neighborhoods with less noise pollution drink less and are stressed less and self-medicate less. So, and have lower rates of anxiety and depression. So, there are all of these correlations to functional social health and happiness that are related to environment. So I think we have to accept a certain amount of that. We're going to stop being horrible to ourselves and horrible to each other when we've cleaned up and fixed our environment a little bit. Mm-hmm. And that includes the people who are supposed to be helping caretake for us, help us with that. Because it really is like coming into a room with a bunch of toddlers and everything all over the place, and you can't just go, all right, toddlers, clean this mess up right now. Mop, broom, let's go. Because they can't. They can't. And as I like to point out, the population of the planet is divided on the IQ scale right down the middle. Mm-hmm. So 100 is the average. 50% of the population is below 100.
Really?
50% of the 50% of the population is above 100. So you've got a half of the population that's kind of smart, and another half of the population that's kind of dumb.
Yeah.
And what we are stuck in is a situation where a lot of the smart people are doing the very best they can to take advantage of and exploit as many of the not so smart people as they can, for one reason or another, instead of saying, hey, why don't we accept the fact that not all of the people on this end of the scale can do everything that they need to get done, and in the interest of civilization, let's kind of put some cooperative effort into helping everybody sort of accomplish the goals that we need to accomplish as a civilization, not because it's an argument of, well, that should be my responsibility and I shouldn't have to pay for that, you should do that on your own. That's not the discussion. The discussion is, do you want to live in a crappy habitat with poop everywhere, or do you want to live in a civilized habitat? And the answer is, if you want to live in a civilized habitat, then freaking act like it and start cooperating to fix problems instead of going, you fix that, you solve it, I ain't going to touch your problem, I don't want to help you, I'm not using my taxes. If we don't cooperate on problem solving, we're just going to live in a poopy habitat forever.
Mm-hmm. Well, I have to agree with you 10,000%. And being a native New Yorker, right, I've seen areas of New York completely turn around from when I was a kid. I can't even describe to you what the Bronx looked like when I was a kid. Or even just look at the Times Square in the 1970s. And certainly there are a lot of people who object, the Disney money, you've taken the great flavor out of the city. Well, you know what? Bullshit. I'm sorry. Once people have the help that they need, or really it starts with the attitude. It starts with the desire to make the change, and then the change gets manifested. So I'm in complete agreement with you. And also, I'm sure you hear an awful lot of conspiracy theory about, evildoers and demonic beings, and we're under the control, and it's all this, that, and the other. I don't think personally we need any help to be terrible to each other.
Right?
I think that's something that we have down from when the first Miocene apes were hurling, rocks at each other. And we can even see it in the animal kingdom. Our closest ancestors, the chimpanzees, it's only recently been discovered that they have like tribal wars, that they go on full warfare. And so this is something that we don't need any help from any evildoers from outside of our paradigm to instigate. And also, I think, and I think maybe you would agree with me, Randy, that the longer I study and look at things and listen to people, I think everything is vibration. Everything is vibration. When you're in the spirit body, you're simply in a form of your existence that's oscillating at a higher level. Some people can perceive it, some people have a more difficult time, but everything is vibration.
Well, in the words of one of my favorite human beings, Bill Hicks, matter is just energy slowing down.
Yeah, denser and slower. That's and I know for a fact in observing either craft if they want to be observed, or observing paranormal phenomena. Some people are able to perceive these things with visual processing, and some people simply are not at that point. They may be blocked, but I'm really convinced there's a pretty heavy-duty genetic component where you can trace people's PSI abilities back generations, generally through the female line, but you can trace it. So we all have potential. We're all, we can all learn to read. We can all learn to tie our shoes, and and so I think this contemporary functional concept of psionics is something that really is going to be essential in us surviving as a society. And speaking of different societies, this is a little segue.
Absolutely.
Whoop. Now, just back to your the Mars Defense experience for just a brief time. Now, it's come out fairly recently. There's been a lot of hubbub about photographs of Mars, NASA photographs of Mars, etc., that have in fact been doctored in some way, and that actually, either through terraforming or whatever, that there is actually some atmosphere on Mars. There are blue skies, and it is possible to breathe. Is this something that you experienced, or was it always, when you did go outside, was it always with oxygen tanks and things of that nature?
Well, when we landed the first time when we arrived on a transport ship, was Ares Primus is somewhere near in the equatorial region, so it's a bit warmer. We were able to touch down, walk right out onto the tarmac into what I would call a kind of a high mountain air experience. So it was, a little thin, a little cool, but I could feel the sunlight, hit my face. I was like, oh, that's the sun hitting my face, and I could, take a breath and go, oh, that's cool, dry air. So I was a little surprised and shocked, but also we were being disembarked very, very quickly, so there's not a lot of time to go, wait, what's going on? Because it's go, 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 go. But where we were stationed, much farther north, it's way colder, and really for reasons of temperature, we did not go outside without environment suits. So there were times when you could pop your hood up and, very, very, very cold air sometimes, but you just did not want to, on a regular basis, try and go outside without an environment suit, because the air was a bit thinner, more thin and colder up there, and so it was hazardous to go outside without an environment suit on.
I see. And I know you've...
Oh, and I will say this. Later on, I will look up for it. I have a file here somewhere that has... I have a couple of satellite photos that were taken by JPL satellites that still have the time JPL stamps on everything, that show forests and some aminals and stuff in the southern region. So I'll send you those satellite pictures, and you can look at those. So we know that there's trees, we know there's animals, we know there's some running water. There's absolutely, not just from what I've seen, but from all the other evidence that we've procured, there's minimal, air, water, life, lizards, little birds, as well as some larger things that other people have seen that we didn't see too much of up north. But clearly, it's livable, breathable. And as some people haven't been following totally along, we went from, oh wait, no, there's no water, no air, to, oh wait, look, there's running water. That was last year. And then what slid in about February, a lot of people missed this in February. They said, oh wait, no, now our spectrographs say there's also oxygen in the atmosphere, by the way. That was like January, February. So within a year, we went from, nope, no water, no breathable air, to, well, yeah, there's some running water and some breathable air. So we've already, like at that short period of time, have a completely different official answer on what Mars is. Just like that, boom. And it's not front page. It's not like we're, there's a parade, going down the street. But they said it. We've already changed the official report on it. So all that has to happen is more things like that just go, oh, here's a new piece of information. 6 months later, oh, here's a new piece of information. And every time you have a new piece of information, you can just kind of reset what is, and water level, temperature level, whatever, until people are more adaptive to whatever official experience or statement that they're going to try to roll out with. We're expecting still some crazy disclosure stuff this year, but everything is just getting so wild and wacky, there's no predicting how it's all going to happen at this point. But we still expect some pretty heavy events to sort of make this more real very, very soon.
Yeah, I wouldn't be at all surprised.
That's my shake is like, I don't have a date for anybody. That's my shake. I don't have a date for anybody, and everybody wants to know when. But I think we are the closest we have ever been to, official disclosure conversations. So I think that's encouraging, and that's something people should be pretty happy about. I just wish I could provide more specific information about that, but I can't. I just know what's going on is we're moving towards that. And like 20 different things and 50 agencies are moving towards that. So I'm going to find it hard to believe that we're not going to arrive at that destination soon.
Yeah, I agree. And, Randy, you did discuss, without going into any of your more distressing experiences, I know you talked about the indigenous reptilian beings of Mars, and that there were groups that were more sophisticated than other groups. And did you have the impression that these beings are in fact indigenous, that they had always lived underground, or are they rogue beings who somehow settled on Mars after their own planets became dysfunctional?
Well, the native reptoids there are native. They are from there, and they have been there for a very, 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 very long time. The insectoids who live there have also been there long enough that I would consider that it's been their home for a very, 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 very long time. We're probably the most recent habitants to sort of arrive and declare that it is also home for us. But partly we can do that because we have ancestors that are from there, and so part of the reason we're able to even stake any legal claim whatsoever is, hey, our ancestors were from here, so we can come back and live here. And the natives were like, yeah, okay, you can. And so they tolerated us to live and fight, and conflict territorially and so forth, which is just a natural kind of thing to do there. And the best way that I think you can describe the reptoids there is that they have become very factionalized after the sort of breakup of the planet, which, they're already sort of in this heavy war kind of state anyway. But they became very, 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 very factionalized and fractionalized and into much, much smaller subgroups. And so there's some very differing attitudes and philosophies about how they engage and live their lives. And the easiest way to describe that is that there's some groups which, if you engage with them, you're more likely to get into a fight, not necessarily because they want to eat you, but because they want to test you. If you're not worthy to fight them, they'll just kill you and eat you. Like, oh, you're not even worthy to have a conversation with. You can't fight for crap. So they may want to fight with you just to make sure that you're worthy to have a conversation with. versus those that will simply, it's about eating you. Like this, like, oh, no, we don't want to talk to you. We're going to either eat you or not. And so it really depends on where you're coming from or who you're meeting on whether you're going to have an attitude that might be friendly or one that is absolutely going to be hostile. So it's still rough territory in different places. I wouldn't want to just roam Mars freely, given knowing what hostile people and beings there are in some places who just don't want you anywhere near there. They're just going, ooh, snack, So really that.
So that these tenuous treaties, do you feel, are sort of still largely in place, or are we still violating or extending our part of the agreement illegally, which is sort of something that you encountered, I know.
I think, from what I understand, we are actually in a higher state of compliance with those treaties than we were probably 10 years ago. And we are at what I would call a tentative peace with the northern tribes, which are fairly rational. I would say that the southern tribes don't participate with that agreement nearly as much. As far as they're concerned, they're like, what agreement, white man? Or what agreement, pink skin? And so, they have no desire to necessarily, agree with or concur with any peace treaty whatsoever. So it's still a little Wild West in that area. But my understanding is we're not. So really, if we're still testing military equipment, it's going to be against the tribes that we're just still having hostilities with. It's just going to be sort of like 1845. Let's test some of our new, shooting irons against them engines we're having troubles with. Right? I mean, same scenario. Right now, we're just in the future, and we're like, oh, we're having trouble with these other reptoids. Let's go ahead and test our equipment on them. And but here's what's happening though. The colonies are in disarray. So if people have not heard this already, the colonies are in absolute disarray. We think that a violent revolution is straight up like blown up, and that there are workers holding a physical uprising against their sort of slave masters and cruel oppressors. And that's not much. We don't know much more than that because there's a lot of communication that's been stopped, and there's a lot of places where they're unable to land and sort of see what's going in person without getting shot at or being hostile at by anybody. So in some cases, it doesn't matter who you think you might want to help or be. Hey, no, we really would like to help. And they're kind of, get out of here. We don't want your help. We don't want your kind helping us. Get out of here. And so, really, I hate to be like that about it, but in some ways, there's just this very primal human response that seems to be going on of like, we've taken all we can take, we ain't taking no more. And they've really just severed some of the underground train lines and blown up a few key factories and power plants and separated, seriously geographically separated some areas so that they could, claim some territory. So operations have been seriously disrupted. We don't know what manufacturing is continuing, what manufacturing has been absolutely halted. We know that there was a process of treaty compliances that were underway, environmental investigations and so forth that were, looking into pollution allegations as well as the labor violations and so forth. But that, in the process of conducting those investigations and getting those compliances, a full-blown rebellion has broken out. And so we're kind of in the process where there's not a lot we can do to continue with that compliance process in places where we don't have safe zones. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So if we can get into an area and make sure that it's not polluting into the environment, can't cross it off this and say that, we basically have to put question marks in red zones and places and say, oh, we don't know what's going on there. And so when we have to report to people that we have to try and have treaty compliance with, we have to say, well, we're trying to get that treaty compliance, but we're having some problems with that. And they're, understanding of those kinds of things, like, oh, okay, we'll pause while you sort that out. So We're definitely in the middle of sorting out a just full-on Red Faction Mars Rebellion for reals that the workers have just said, enough with you bastards, and they're fighting back.
Wow.
Now, who's helping them? Who's been giving them advice, tactical advice? I mean, who kind of, may have just like dropped a few key people in and said, we're going to help you sort this out. I have no idea, no information on that, but they certainly may have been some folks that helped that process along, because that's the sort of thing that people, professional agents and military professionals do, is know how to go in and start revolutions and rebellions and so forth. So who knows? But that's what's happening there. That's a little exciting.
Wow. Well, I'm sure more and more information is going to come out. We're living in terrifically exciting times, and believe it or not, we're just about to wrap up. I did want to tell everybody out there in Skype and YouTube and EMN land, I know that this is one of 3 in-depth interviews we have planned with Captain Randy Kramer. This is going, if you're watching this, it's after September 1st, and also again on October 15th. And on November 1st, excuse me, on December 1st, November 15th, oh my goodness, October 15th and December 1st, we'll be posting the second and third part of our in-depth interview with Captain Randy Kramer, and I'm sure we're going to be wanting to cover political situations as well. You just mentioned some fascinating stuff to me about what's going on in Korea with the lunatic Kim Jong-il. We've got about 5 minutes. If you just want to give us a little teaser about what we're going to be talking about on the next time, that would be fantastic.
Um, I'll give you. Okay, I'll give you the quick teaser. His psych profile, boy, does it reads like a spoiled imperial child. I kind of refer to him as an indoor house cat, because he's really just been, like that fluffy cat that's raised on a pillow, and someone brings its bowl to a little crystal every day, like that cat, raised indoors with a lot of luxuries, a lot like that. And he's got some real psychosexual issues, megalomaniacal inferiority complex issues. I'll go into some depth next time, but I'm just going to tease a little bit. He is a piece of work, let me tell you. But we think that the more he feels insignificant on the global stage, the more likely it is that he's going to do something really crazy to act out for attention, which may even be very fatalistic. It may not be something that's, I'm going to get something out of this, but it may be, this is going to be the big end, my big, da hurrah, top of the world mob, goes up in a ball of flames. We're really, really, truly concerned that he is very, very desperately, every action that he's moving towards, saying, I got a fusion bomb and now I can launch it off the submarine, that every step is not just saber rattling, but him actually trying to escalate to be able to perform an action which is real and serious. And, he's a little toddler who's not getting the attention screaming anymore, and he's about to just start running around the house, dropping lamps and tipping jars over and stuff and going crazy, and it's going to end badly for him mostly. I also will add as a teaser to that conversation that I think more than likely, though, we won't be the part of the United States, will not be the party that likely deals with him or polices him in the region, that now that we have released Japan from its restrictions on forming its own military, that they are probably, hint, hint, wink, wink, developing a super secret weapon that would probably be the agent of their dealing with that. So we'll talk about that next time.
All right. Well, Randy, I just want to thank you so much for joining us. I want to thank you for your bravery, your honesty, all the work that you're doing. And I know if folks want to reach you directly to find out about your teaching or whatever, they can do so through Earth Citizen Consulting, and that would be the best way to get a hold of you. Yes. Sure. All right. And we will be really looking forward to welcoming you back on October 15th. And also on December 1st. Randy, thank you so much, and keep on keeping on. Keep your brain firing the way it is, and we'll look forward to speaking to you again very shortly. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It was fabulous.
Thank you for watching Contact TV.
We would like to thank our generous sponsors, Lightwork Hypnosis, UFOria and the UFOria Chronicles, Earth Mystery News, Conspiracy Culture Books, MUFON Canada, Free Experiencers, the Dr. Edgar Mitchell Foundation for Research into Extraterrestrial Encounters, and Variety Store Productions.
For guest booking information, please email Wes Roberts at producer@contacttv.ca. And don't forget to join us on Facebook and Twitter.